I am really excited to introduce to you guys a fellow by the name of Kenny Shue, who's fast becoming a rising star in the world of conservative scholarship. Kenny is the president of the organization Color Us United. He's written for The Federalist. He's written for the Washington Examiner, Daily Signal, Quillette. If you've ever read Quillette, you should, if you've not checked out that website, it's a fantastic website. Very, very good scholarship there. His new book that's just come out is called An Inconvenient Minority. I got my copy here. The Attack on Asian American Excellence and the Fight for Meritocracy. And I got to tell you, man, since I've seen this book come out, Kenny has been everywhere. It's kind of weird. It's like he's stalking me. I mean, he's all over YouTube. He's been on Tucker's show. He's been on Fox several times. He's been featured in Newsweek. I thought that was pretty cool that Newsweek published an article of his. And he's just, he's one of the most articulate exponents for the fight and the necessity for distinctive American culture rooted in faith, family, and freedom. So Kenny, is he here? Come on out, Kenny.
Yes.
Introduce yourself to everybody. Here he is. All right.
All right, I'm here. Here I am.
There you are. Hey, Kenny, good to see you, man.
I couldn't ask for a better introduction, Steve, especially from someone who I respect so much. So it's great being here.
Well, you're very, very sweet. So let's set the stage here a little bit. Why don't you give us a bit of your backstory here? Tell us a little about your family, your life's journey towards writing this book. Just give us a sense of your little bio.
Man, well, this question is always tough to start because I've been so many places. I grew up in Virginia and Richmond. I moved to New Jersey when I was around 14 years old. My parents are Chinese immigrants. They came from China in 1990. And my dad was a small businessman. He always taught me the value of hard work and excellence. And one of his main contributions, he's contributed to my life so much, but he taught me to be grateful for what I have. And particularly to be grateful for the freedom that I have in America, because China is not the same thing, and sometimes he even reflects, he says, well, maybe I could have made more money in China, but I would not have been in the land of freedom with the opportunity that I have here and the ability to raise my kids the way that I want. And I think that's so true, and the other thing that he taught me was the value of hard work. This is why, for me, laziness was not an option when I was growing up. Not only did I have to work hard academically, but I was a sports person too. I ran cross country, I played tennis, everything like that. And so, seeing people today in my generation defend a culture of self-victimhood based on a presupposed identity category, to me represents the toxic downslide of a generation. Right. And you have to solve it. And the best way for me that I felt that I could solve it was with my talent and my skills as a writer. And I wanted to talk about excellence. I wanted to talk about America's culture of excellence. And I wanted to talk about how one critical minority, Asian Americans, are critical towards recovering this culture of excellence, not because of their race or anything like that. It's not because of race that Asian Americans are some of the most highly educated and high achieving people in this country, but it is because of culture. You have to talk about culture. You have to talk about cultural values. Otherwise, you buy into the left's argument that everybody is, just inherently the same. Everybody has different talents and skills, but you always need to work hard in order to achieve the best of your ability.
So this is why I like asking you questions because I mean, there's so much beautiful stuff. So in classical education, one of the things we talk about, the traditionalist conception of life. It doesn't matter really in the end which religious tradition you're talking about. The traditionalist, sort of the pre-modern conception of life, saw gratitude and humility as the highest virtues, because that's the natural That's a natural sentiment that awakens when you encounter divine life, the true, the good, and the beautiful. You encounter truth, goodness, and beauty. It awakens awe and wonder. And the natural sentiment then is gratitude. And the way you encounter that truth, goodness, and beauty is through culture. I notice in your interviews, you constantly go back to this is, when all is said and done, this is not a systemic racist issue. This is a cultural issue. What kind of culture are we cultivating within these different people groups or demographics in our nation? And then what kind of fruits does that culture bear? And in that sense, you stand right in line with, other great scholars like Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams and Carol Swain. I mean, I know you know all these names, and it's just, again, it's just beautiful to see. Do you mind, Kenny, just telling everybody how old you are?
23.
Now, I should have saved that for the end. Let me push forward. What I love about your book and about what you're doing here, I think you do it quite masterfully, is you weave together theory and practice. So at one level, at a real, very tangible, microscopic level, you deal with Harvard University admission standards that you argue clearly discriminate against Asian Americans. And yet you're able to understand that in light of a wider lens, a wider meta theory of, call whatever name you want to call it, cultural Marxism, CRT, identity politics, that of course is itself not based on any actual evidence, right? But it's used more as a frame, as a faith, quite literally. And then evidence is whatever the theory considers valid to be such, whatever fits with the narrative. Can you give us a little insight into the thought process by which you weaved together those two things, the theory of CRT together with Harvard's admissions practices, because you really knock sparks off of both those in your study?
So, yes. And in doing so, I want to talk about something that you just said, which is our culture in many ways determines our destiny, right? And what we have now is that Asian American excellence on the left, on the liberal side, on the liberal end of culture, has often been greeted with envy and resentment, right? If you're a meritocrat and everything like that, you say, okay, well, whatever, the best, the smartest, should get the reward. This is the belief in a meritocracy. But unfortunately, among the left now, you have this strain of resentment politics where they see Asians doing well at things like academic excellence and things like that. And this is especially true in the elite progressive centers. So New York, San Francisco, also places, by the way, where there are a lot of Asians, where the primary competition for high achieving progressive white elites are immigrant Asian Americans. That's the primary competition. So you see this tension right here, this resentment of Asian success, but that manifests itself in the Harvard admissions process. The Harvard admissions process in the university is founded upon this idea of critical race theory. And maybe your readers will know this, but critical race theory presupposes that there is a privileged and oppressed class, and we need to, for the sake of equity, uplift the oppressed. And if we have to downgrade the privileged in the name of the oppressed, so be it. The problem is they put Asians in the privileged category now. This is what Harvard admissions does. They put Asians in the privileged category. So as a result, if we want to uplift Black and Hispanic populations, you have to kick out well-qualified whites and Asian people from the admission system. And so as a result, you have Asians have to score 440 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a Black person, and about 300 points higher than a Hispanic person, and about 120 points higher than a white person. So actually Harvard's hierarchy of privilege and oppression actually puts Asians as the most privileged category, because they don't want Harvard to be, in their own words, if Harvard did not discriminate on the basis of race, Asians would make up about 43% of Harvard student body, instead they make up about 18%. So this is the admission system that we're dealing with today.
You talk a lot about metrics in their that they use in their college admissions, 3 in particular, and that's kind of the key of understanding how they ever so subtly sneak in these discrimination practices. Can you elucidate that for us?
Well, the 3 metrics that Harvard uses are admitting. They use 3 primary metrics to determine who gets into Harvard. One is academics, one is extracurriculars, and one is personality. And Asian Americans do the best out of all the races on academics. They do best of all the races on extracurriculars, but they do the worst out of all the races on personality. Okay, so, okay, now I have to go to the next step. I'm not necessarily denying that Asians have worse personalities according to Harvard, but you have to go and look for the evidence. So you look for the evidence, you try to look at the alumni interviews, right? That's where you can, I guess, get the best sense of a person's personality. Asians do just as well as whites. They're actually on the top in alumni interviews. And teacher recommendations, the same thing. They're a little under whites, but they're above blacks and Hispanics. So where is the objective evidence that Asians have worse personalities in Harvard's admissions? There is none, and what do they measure in personality? Well, they measure things like leadership, charisma, friendliness, likability. So basically they're saying, based out of nothing but a stereotype with no objective evidence to defend it, that Asians are worse personalities and therefore they should be cut out of the Harvard admissions process.
Wow. Yeah. And then the whole notion even of personality is just so subjective. How much also just, I thought about it right now. How much do these discriminating practices affect Indians, South Asians?
And so Indian immigrants are interesting because a lot of Indian immigrants come to this country and, they actually have language acquisition. They were under British colonial rule and this, right. So they actually have English skills. And because of that, they are in some ways more advantaged than, say, the typical Vietnamese American or the typical Chinese American or everything like that. But again, these are all on average, and sure. Every individual is different.
Sure, of course. No, absolutely. Back in November last year, federal appeals court upheld a ruling that Harvard University does not discriminate against Asian Americans in admissions. What's your opinion on that ruling? What are the judges missing there?
So the reason why they upheld the case for Harvard on Harvard's perspective is because they're working within this framework that was set back in 1979 by a Supreme Court case called Baki versus Regents of California. Your listeners can look it up. Basically, Baki allows colleges to use race in their admissions process. So colleges are allowed to racially discriminate in their admissions process for the sake of what they called diversity. That's why. Colleges are the only institution in America that are allowed to that are specifically allowed to racially discriminate. I take that back because corporations right now are encouraged to racially discriminate in the name of equity.
Right. But, interesting. So in other words, it's spreading. It's spreading outside of the knowledge class, as it were, and now it's moving into the very professions that they accredit.
It's spreading, and it comes from this diversity rationale. So the reason why schools are allowed to use race admissions is because people think that it makes a more diverse class, which leads to X benefits and everything like that. Here's the problem with that argument. The problem with that argument is that what makes you think that race is the factor that brings different personalities and different balances into Harvard? I mean, think about it. There are so many Asians who are very diverse, not every Asian just wants to be a math major or go into math or be a test-taking robot with no personality or anything like that. Why are we using race as the proxy for diversity? Some of these campuses are very ideologically homogenous. Right. They're not diverse in that sense. So why is race suddenly the proxy for all of diversity and all of its good and beneficial fruits, but not diversity of thought?
What do you say to those who argue that it's not so much about the present as it is the past? We're trying to. This is making amends, as it were, for how history failed certain ethnic minorities, particularly Blacks. We should be making amends by providing for them a leg up, right? And so as to make up for this oppressed past. What do you say to that?
So I think that, Black Americans have a special experience in this country. They have a unique experience, and we have to acknowledge the history of that. That being said, Harvard's admissions process and affirmative action is not the way to do it. Because if you take a look at the Black population that is admitted to Harvard, 71% of the Black admits at Harvard are wealthy backgrounds, upper middle class, upper class. At this point, you have an affirmative action system that's benefiting the children of Black lawyers and Black doctors. And it's not benefiting the ones that affirmative action, initially sought to benefit. It's so interesting with regards to equity, right? With regards to equity, people like to say, well, we need more Black representation here. We need more Hispanic representation here. But then I just point out with the example of the NBA. We're 75% Black. It's 75% African American. Do we need more Asians in the NBA? Do we need more whites in the NBA? This is the kind of thinking that undergirds. If you think everything in terms of racial representation, you stop caring about the individual merit of a person. Of course, there's going to be, when you admit based on merit, there's going to be certain racial disparities, but it's not the racial disparities themselves that are the problem. It's whether the disparities are just. It's whether they were the people who are eventually get into those programs deserve to get into those programs. So I'm a big defender of meritocracy.
Yeah, and then it goes back to culture as well. So I think your emphasis on culture, and that certain cultures do produce that gratitude that itself builds and achieves, versus others that produce resentment and disdain and anger and hatred that only destroy in all kinds of ways. I just don't see how that can be. That can't be ignored anymore. You're young, but you're wise beyond your years. That's for sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Steve. Means a lot. Hannah, really appreciate you too. And thanks so much, guys.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kenny. It's great. And we'll definitely be keeping in touch and keeping abreast of all your work. It's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.